My name is Carl Quo, and this is Founder Quest, a podcast about the journeys of starting a game studio. This one is a bit of a weird one. I interview my co-founder in Jam and Tea, Michael Yichao, about his perspectives in founding the studio and our journey thus far. I wanted to talk to Yichao because he is a first-time startup founder on a team with second-time founders, and he comes from much more of the creative and design background than the other two of us. We talk through his experiences thus far, how he started to think about founding journeys and co-founder dating, and you can hear firsthand where some of the questions from this podcast originated from. After this episode, we'll likely be taking a break until the new year. Thanks so much for listening so far, and I'll be back soon with new episodes. But for now, let's jump into the conversation with Yichao. So this will be an interesting start because where I normally start is how you decided to start a company. And as with many of these questions, I know a lot more about the story already going into it, but I don't want to use that and accidentally have people who are listening be like, wait, what happened? So what was, take me through the lead up to the moment where you're like, yes, I'm going to start a company. Like what led up to that moment personally, and what made you jump into that decision?
Yeah, great question. And fun story, because of course this involves you in a large part of it. So at the time I was working at Phoenix Labs, and I knew that I was kind of looking at my next opportunity. The direction of what Phoenix was focused on had shifted in a kind of fairly dramatic way, and I knew that I was just wanting to move on to do the next thing. And so I was in interview rounds for various narrative leadership roles at a couple different places. And I had been in conversation with you, Carl, as you were considering a founding journey of your own. I remember when you first told me about it, you mentioned, and I'm also looking for a creative person, if you can think of anyone in mind. And I'm like, I'll definitely let you know, Carl, if I can think of anyone. Good luck. And so we had continued our conversation as I had been on my search and journey as well. And even as I was looking for other roles, there was a lot of thought in my mind too of, I've been at a number of companies at this point in my career, and there's things that I've seen that were done amazingly, and also a lot of lessons learned along the way. And I was looking for a company that really fit a lot of the things, of course, that I really believed in. But then as we continued to talk more, you shared more about your founding journey, the thought definitely occurred / was incepted in me of, hey, there's an opportunity here for me to build something that I really believe in and to really pursue something like that. So I don't know if I'm giving away your secret recipe, but the thing you've told me that you do very well and was very effective on me was you like to ask people, can you think of this shaped person that is actually the person you're hoping would say, that's me? And that's absolutely kind of what happened here. You're like, I'm looking for that creative co-founder still. And I was like, oh, well, that I do fit a lot of those things, but, it's not something that had been on the forefront of my mind. But in our conversation, the thing that really inspired me to really consider it more seriously was, one, I think you and I both aligned on the core mission that really was passionate for you, was bringing players together and solving loneliness through games. And I was like, that is something I can deeply get behind. And then two, you had another co-founder who really was a crucial part of that puzzle, right? And so there was a very clear vision for you about finding this 3 co-founder company that had a lot of these structures in place from the start that to me were all of the things that I was looking for in roles that I was interviewing with, and gave me an opportunity to really have an ability to influence and craft and shape that company and culture in a way that ultimately, pulled my attention and definitely got me on board to start that conversation and start that journey with you. So yeah, I think that's the quick and dirty story of how this all got started for me.
For sure. It's weird hearing my own secrets revealed back to me. When you were like, I want to do this. This co-founding team sounds really interesting. This problem space sounds really interesting. This opportunity feels like the right next step for what I want to do in my life. And then you sort of mentally or emotionally committed to this journey and then realize, oh, I need to learn a bunch of stuff if I'm actually going to do this. So talk me through a little bit like, okay, now that I've committed to this, what did you feel like you had to go out and learn? What did you feel like you had to go and figure out in order to actually commit to the path, right? Like, because there's the sort of emotionally committing to the path, and then there's the like logistically committing to the path. And talk to me about what that gap of knowledge and learning was for you.
Yeah, I think one of the things that drew me to the path was the fact that I knew I would be learning a ton of new things, right? And I think that is always super appealing to me, is looking for opportunities to grow and to gain new skills. And so, I've started companies in the past, but in a very different industry at a very different scale. And so, we knew that we were going down the path of, seeking VC funding and building a certain kind of company. And I had not done that before. So a lot of that was becoming much more familiar with that space, learning what would be required for us as founders to embark on that journey, the things ahead, and trying to map things to skill sets that I had, but maybe had applied in other disciplines. Or, hey, this is something brand new that I'm going to have to learn how to do and how to tackle. And so really step one was just sorting through, trying to uncover as many of the unknown unknowns, the things I didn't know, in order to sort them into buckets of, things that I think I have some backgrounding in, and things that are going to be brand new for me to pick up. And then beyond just the founding things, it became, the three of us are dividing up all of the work of starting a company, which means putting on a lot of hats that either we hadn't worn in years, or that were new to us, or that were, everything in between, or deeply within our wheelhouse. And so mentally sorting through that list and being like, all right, I'm going to have to brush off my marketing skills, and I'm going to have to punch up my PR, hat, and everything along those lines was an exercise in and of itself. So even just organizing, knowing what to learn and focus on was a big part of that process.
When you look back at that journey, right? Because we've been on this for 14 months, 16 months. What is time? We've been on this for a while. I mean, I guess since the founding, like the choice of founding, like we've been developing for 16 months, but it's been
closer to even a year.
Well, more than a year. Almost
2 years.
Almost 2 years since we like really committed emotionally to the path. When you look across that journey and that learning and all the things that you sort of lived through and had to learn and whatever mistakes or amazing home runs you had along the way, when someone comes up to you and is like, so I'm thinking about starting a company, what would be the like distilled learnings that you'd be like, if I can put this in your brain so that you are better prepared, what would it be?
One of the first things I would say is have a deep conversation with the people you're thinking about co-founding with, and strongly consider co-founding instead of solo founding. I think both of those things were a big crucial part of our success, and something that I'm deeply grateful for. Having co-founders who are able to supplement your strengths and weaknesses, and who you can help share the burden of the of the effort with, it has been huge and is really important. And at the same time, equally important is really deeply having conversations with them to get to know each other, know each other's goals, acknowledge and know each other's strengths and weaknesses, how you react in stressful situations, and building a deep level of trust and rapport, even if the person you're co-founding with is like your best friend, right? Because it is a very different relationship to go from social or even coworkers to co-founders, and the level of stress and pressures that will be applied to you. The more you are deeply, truly aligned and understand and on the same page about what you want to accomplish and what's important and what is non-negotiable, the less those will come up as surprises or conflicts or roadblocks when things get stressful and there's a million other decisions or pressures weighing on you at the same time. And so I think that would be the number one thing that resonates. That, and just really examining, is this a journey you want to go on? Because it is difficult, and there's a lot of other life things that will have to shape around the effort and energy needed to make this work, right? And whether that's examining for yourself or if you have a partner and things like that, including them in that conversation and decision is crucial and setting those expectations correctly is super important in order to really pursue this, I think, and give yourself the best chance for success.
Amazing. So that does, your answer does helpfully become a great transition point to the next topic that I like to talk about, which is, in fact, co-founders. And again, I'm going to get to live through the experience of you describing myself back to me, which is horrifying on a few different levels. But how would you describe the co-founder makeup? Because like I know how I would describe our co-founder makeup, but how would you describe your co-founder makeup to the folks listening?
Yeah, I think we have a 3 co-founder setup with Aaron as CTO, bringing in his technical knowledge and his experience integrating new technologies into games. I'll start over so we skip the cough and make Chris's editing life happier. Yeah, so I think for us, we have a 3 co-founder setup, right? With Aaron being our CTO, leading not only tech, but also bringing in his history of integrating new technologies into games. Yourself, Carl, as CEO, bringing not only the business side, but also a deep passion for social design and social interaction. And then myself as the creative lead, bringing not only a history of game design, but also an experience within interactive design and improvisational play that has been surprisingly deeply relevant as we've explored the technologies we have on the game, right? And so what I really appreciate is that we had a unifying initial mission of solving loneliness through games and connecting players through play. And from that, we were able to draw from each of our strengths and also a technological moment to identify what is the problem that the 3 of us are best shaped to solve, and how can we find a unique solution that no other team has the strengths that we have to bring to the table.
I think it's always interesting to hear when there is an idea of like, okay, we are a particular shape. What is the best avenue for us to pursue that fits that shape versus the reverse of, how do we shape ourselves to be the right team for the moment, right? And I think that in that moment when you're founding a company and finding co-founders, you sit on the edge of that, right? Because
absolutely,
you can pick co-founders, right, to try and shape yourself for a moment, but also because it's so much about trust and everything else, right? Like it's never cleanly one side of that equation or the other. When you came on board, you sort of mentioned that you were coming into a mix where there were sort of 2 already committed co-founders and you would be joining as a third. As you were processing joining that team, how did you decide that the mix that was there was the right mix for you to join?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we had a lot of long and deep discussions with that. And we even discussed other possible shapes for the co-founding that we would have, right? And there was a moment where we had a 4th person who was very cool and exciting that we were considering possibly 4 co-founders. And for me, ultimately, the conversation and the consideration boiled down to the deep trust that I built with you and Aaron in terms of that alignment of mission and goals. And the way that I put it, like really bluntly, when I talk to my friends, I'm like, these are 2 guys that I trust that when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, we will make decisions that we can stand by and are proud of, and we will do our best to do right by the people who come join us on that journey. And there's a lot of other things and complexities and considerations along the way and along that path, of course. But for me, I'm like, if we are down in the trenches and worst comes to work and our back is pressed against the wall, I trust both of you implicitly to be good people and to be people that I will not regret having worked on something with. And everything else was validating a lot of, different logistical concerns and practical concerns. But with that at its core, and once that was established via our many deep conversations and long discussions and really digging into knowing each other better as people and as folks in the industry and all of that, with that at its core, the rest became more about checking boxes than really having to make a hard decision.
You've mentioned a couple times that, we went on this series of long conversations and folks who have listened to the podcast before have heard my co-founder dating questions that I kicked everything off with, and they're a little bit intense for a first conversation. But when you reflect on the journey and your own path towards wanting to found a company at all, let alone with the people that you founded it with and the shape and all of these things, what were the most important conversations for you to have to figure out if Aaron and I were the right co-founders to go on this journey?
I think the conversations around, hey, what are we like when we're the most stressed? Or put more bluntly, what are we like when we're at our worst? Or what are we like when things are the hardest? Was really helpful and impactful. And also, we discussed very openly from the first get-go, like, hey, what is our runway where we take no salary and we're just out fundraising and building, and before we've got funding, like, how much time do we each of us have? What is our salary expectation and needs to support the household that we are a part of? Just conversations that are, to your point, are deeply personal. But I think starting off with these conversations and talking through these points, I think it's easy to have a desire to be polite and to be friendly and to kind of address surface level things and to latch onto the exciting points of starting a company and the possibility without talking about the hardships and the hard things that are definitely going to come along. And by addressing the hard parts first and establishing a baseline of expectation, there's never a gap between what I'm imagining this company looks like and what we are able to put into it and what is actually reality. And so as I've talked to other folks who are on that founding journey, I've seen folks run into that gap unintentionally because they just never talked about it directly. And suddenly they realize both people were imagining very different things. Or one person's like, oh, I had maybe 2 to 3 months of time to do this before I need a paycheck. And the other person's like, I was going to go for it for a year. Oh no. Right. And so those harder topics that require, a lot of trust and to broach, I think were foundational and absolutely essential in helping me make that decision.
To put you a little bit on the spot, mostly because we have the trust where I can ask this and it's despite being recorded, a relatively safe space to answer honestly. We had a lot of conversations, and I've advocated, I think, on the podcast to have tough conversations and ask things like, what are your stress reactions? What are you like when you're at your worst? As we record this podcast, we are a week away from shipping a game, 2 weeks away from starting a fundraising round. Stress is very high. In fact, I am recording this podcast in part as a way to ease stress and accomplish something. How, over the course of the journey, how well do you think that those early conversations about stress reactions and weaknesses and strengths line up to how we act when we're stressed?
There's a lot of instances where I'm like, oh, 1-to-1. Wow, this was really helpful. I'm glad I was told this because, I remember, just even initial moments where I'm like, why is Carl being this? Seems so out of, I'm like, oh, we talked about this. That's a stress reactor of his. Absolutely. Okay. I've identified it. He also knows this about himself. Like we've all done the work of self-reflection to call these things out. And so I can be like, hey, I think we're stressed. We're doing the thing. And we are able to check in with each other and try to, talk about these points. And that's true, with Aaron as well and myself as well. And, as our team has expanded, folks on that layer of trust, we're all able to hold each other accountable. And what I really appreciate is that we as a company have extended those stress reactors and those questions to our whole team, where we all created a personal document that shared answers of, things that things that are habits of ours, strengths and weaknesses and stress reactors, so that we can identify those behaviors and support each other and give each other grace, right? We all know people get stressed, and when we're stressed, we aren't always at our 100% best, or sometimes, things spike emotionally. And so being able to identify those has been really helpful in just navigating through those rocky parts or just those very difficult high pressure points.
Awesome. When you think about the conversations you've had with us as co-founders and navigating the whole journey so far, how would you describe the ways that we make decisions and deal with disagreements?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think one thing I appreciate is we identify when a big decision needs to be made, and we have a set time uh, in which we work through that decision. Right? We have a weekly meeting where it is the founders, and we have a pre-populated agenda, and we have focused discussion. And I think we've gotten better at this over time as well. Early on, we have 3 loquacious founders who like to talk, and so the meeting tended to be long and rambling, and we've gotten better at being more concise of like, hey, how can we really identify the challenge ahead? What is the key decision that we need to be made? What is the timeline on which it needs to be made? And then really try to drill down and have a very hyper-productive conversation. And I think that intentionality is really important. Oftentimes these decisions can be spread across a lot of different meetings because they cover a lot of different ground or involve different departments. But by really focusing it in on like, hey, this is founder time, and these are founder level business, like, or company level decisions that need to be made and will set the tone and tenor for the rest of our team. That level of clarity and that level of focus in making those decisions, I think, has been pretty helpful.
Let's talk a little bit about fundraising, because you mentioned that, and I know from your background that you've gone on a founding journey with more creative pursuits and smaller entities, well outside the realm of traditional late stage capitalism. And so what's the difference between how you thought we would fundraise Jam and Tea and what the fundraising journey would be and what actually happened?
I think that was one thing that was fairly well done in terms of like, this is an area that I'm brand new to in terms of seeking VC funding and the fundraising journey and what that involves. And that was an area where I learned a lot. And it was really great having you and Aaron as second time founders who have gone on variations of this journey. And so the expectation and the outcome was actually pretty congruous, right? Like, I knew we would have, the pitch gauntlet. And, there's always the ideal of, oh, yes, we'll have this really tight window and everyone will respond promptly to emails, a thing that definitely happens in real life. And then everything will just line up and we'll have some decisions to be made. And it was a lot more of, okay, we're going to improvise a little bit because this person who's super interested is now out on vacation for 2 weeks. And we're just going to kind of try to adjust timelines as this other entity is doing this thing now, right? And so the framework was there, and I think we did our homework and our research and had the experience to know that and to identify it clearly. And then the actual fluidity of what that meant was also, very reasonable. And maybe it's my improv background and my background to be more flexible or with more uncertainty. But for me, that wasn't anything alarming or wildly out of expectation. So.
Talk a little bit about how Jam and Tea is funded in whatever detail I guess we feel comfortable sharing. I have not. I've obviously never spoken about this because I'm always talking to guests. But yeah, tell us a little bit about how Jam and Tea is funded in whatever detail.
Sure. So we received our seed round funding from LVP, Sisu, and One Up Ventures, along with a couple angels who came on board as well. And we raised $3.15 million for that round of funding. And so that has given us the runway to do both the R&D and now to put out the game Retail Mage that we're going to do here in about X number of under a week from the time of recording. So,
yep. You talked about how for this journey and going through this experience, there was a lot of expectation setting that you kind of got from Aaron and myself about sort of what to expect, and felt pretty connected to the improvisation we had to do along the way due to schedules and the vagaries of linear time and human behavior. For you personally, and sort of going on that emotional journey in many ways as a founder, what was the hardest part of it? And like within that, like both the hardest part, the biggest surprise, the biggest learning, things like that. Like what were your big conclusions for you personally as a human coming through that experience?
Yeah, I think it's always unknowns are always stressful, right? And for myself, it's been a while since I've taken the leap of faith of, hey, no regular paycheck for a while. We're just gonna, really full time dedicate ourselves to taking this shot and seeing if we can fundraise. And the time that we were fundraising was a time where things are all of the signals we were getting was this is getting to be a harder and harder time to fundraise. Seed rounds were kind of still happening, but everything was slowing down, right? And so I knew that my expectations were set correctly of like, hey, this is going to be challenging. We have a sharp pitch that I'm really excited about and I think presents a unique vision, but whether or not there will be appetite for it is unknown. And so, of course, the ups and downs of like having people be really excited and then seem to disappear, or having folks follow up with things that made me go, oh, I don't know if this is a good fit. And all of the uncertainty along the way was definitely an emotional roller coaster. And there's definitely times where I'm like, well, gonna be prepping my resume and making sure that that's ready in case this all doesn't come together, and to restart the job hunt. And so I think like it's one thing to intellectually know that it'll be an emotionally challenging road ahead, and going through that roller coaster ride yourself is another of like, oh, right, I'm going to feel a lot of feelings and think some of it will be logical. And I'm going to lean on my co-founders to sift through the signal from the noise. And we're going to, really just go hard on this journey. And, we were very fortunate in that we got a term sheet that was exciting to us, and we ultimately got to embark on that journey. I've talked to many founders since who, the first round of fundraise, they weren't successful. They had to revamp, had to work harder and like build more of a prototype before coming back to it. Right. So I'm very grateful that ultimately our path was fairly smooth. But knowing that, there's always the gap between knowing how a thing will feel and then feeling it in the moment, was definitely a big part of that journey. So.
What are your primary support structures for yourself as a founder?
I'm very lucky to have an amazing partner who's super supportive. And he's been really great as a emotional and logical and sounding board and support throughout the whole thing. I also, this is gonna, speaking very genuinely, you and Aaron as co-founders is also part of that support, right? Knowing that I can lean on both of you in terms of all the different elements of running the company, drawing on our different expertise and experience, and having people to share this challenge with has been really, really great. And friends and family who are super supportive, as well as that community of encouragement and of enthusiasm.
If you could go out and get another, this is a weird metaphor, but another leg of that support stool, right? Like another area of support for your life as a founder, where do you wish you could go and get
that? A super rich uncle with $500 million in the bank. Jokes aside, though, I think for me it's a little hard to imagine or wish for that, because it's kind of like I have a stool that is very sturdy with my 3 legs, and so a 4-legged chair is a very different design, and I don't even know what that 4th chair would come or look like. Again, I feel very fortunate in that the support I have has given me a lot of the energy and the space and confidence I need to do this. So.
Cool. Let me ask it in maybe a little bit a different way. That it's not exactly the same question, but I think it tries to cut to the same thing. Of as you're looking at your journey as a founder, what it's been so far, and knock on wood, it continues into the both near and far future. What do you feel like your biggest struggle has been so far, and how have you been approaching supporting yourself with it so far?
That's a good question. I think one benefit of being very busy when you're founding is it doesn't give you too much time to catastrophize too far out. You have the immediate things you need to solve right away. And so I think probably biggest struggle would be in moments where things are complex or uncertain, knowing whether or not that this thing can continue and whether or not we'll find the next successful step. And what I found usually helps is exactly what I said, which is like, rather than catastrophizing the future or looking too far down the line and being like, how could we possibly get there? The answer of how we get there is focusing on the next steps in front of us. And anytime I've, looked up at the horizon and felt, oh my gosh, this journey is so long, I also have the benefit now of looking back and being like, it's been 2 years. What a blink and a flash in the pan that it was. And look how far we've gotten just taking one step at a time. And so it's this reassurance of our journey so far allows me to focus on, hey, the next step ahead. For us, it's retail made shipping in under a week right now is the next big step and milestone. But from there, it's the next round of fundraise. It's, taking care of our team. It's, all of these things that are just one step ahead to stay grounded rather than adrift into the, unknown of infinite possibility space of what comes next.
When you think about that horizon, and obviously I think for both of us, it's hard to see past, and I've talked about this with a couple other founders. It's hard to see past the next immediate milestone for the studio, especially when it's ship a game to players and see what happens, or go into a fundraise. But if for a moment you can do your best to look past that and think about, 2025, the next year of the studio, knock on wood, what are you thinking a lot about, especially, from the lens of yourself personally in that journey, and spending a lot of time being like, as long as we get past the release and the fundraise, what am I worried about? What am I thinking about? What am I putting energy into preparing myself for?
Yeah, I think we are on the next layer of our pitch journey. And so I'm really excited to support our CEO, Carl Kuo, in that effort. And also we have a lot of potential partnerships that are, kind of flitting between possibility and becoming very real. And that's really exciting as well. So I'm really thrilled to work hard to land some of those. And beyond that, right, like there's an opportunity as we land our next round of fundraise to figure out what is the configuration of our team and what is the right goals, depending on the runway that we lock in, to target. And that moment of, hey, we've had a big success, we've hit a large milestone, what's next from here, right? Like that surveying of the land ahead is always really exciting, because it is both rich with possibility, and every time we've done it, we've gotten more and more information. We've gotten more and more tech built under our belt. We've gotten more and more tools that we've acquired along the way, right? If in the RPG metaphor, we've picked up a legendary sword or two or a magic spell or two, and we're ready to embark on the next journey with brand new tools and brand new capabilities we didn't have before. And so figuring out where we're going to point our energy and our effort and what shape of our party and team is going to be for that next journey is super exciting and really cool.
Amazing. So let me ask you the wildly unfair question that I inflict on people at the sort of end of the main part of the interview, which is, given the experience thus far, and sort of regardless of the outcome for Jam and Tea, would you start another studio?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think so. And I think, just as it was true for Jam and Tea, conditions would have to be right in a lot of different ways. But the opportunity to try to make something in ways that align with your values and goals, the opportunity to bring other people on board and work with folks that excite you and collaborate and build something bigger than any one of you can accomplish. These are things that are immensely rewarding and absolutely worth the effort. And honestly, even before I was in games, right, that was the thing about working in theater that really drew me out of I started out as I'm going to be a novelist. And then I was like, oh, I love theater because there's this amazing ability to collaborate with others to make something better than any one of us could have possibly accomplished. And that experience of creating structures and frameworks where amazing people and creative and talented people and technical people all can come together and make amazing things for others to experience has fundamentally been a driving force of the kinds of work that I've pursued and the kinds of organizations I've been part of and built from the ground up. And so, yeah, I think given the right opportunity to build something like that, absolutely would do it again.
So now we get to the part of the interview that you're actually remarkably familiar with. I often tell listeners that I use this for co-founder dating, and so they get to see that you are very prepared to answer these questions more so than some of my other poor guests who I spring this on. And so we'll just go through these, and you can, and like, if you want to bring up your answers from before, you can go ahead and do it. What is your superpower?
It's so funny because it's been a long time since I've answered these, and I'm like, oh no. And I'm like, I don't have that doc readily available. Oh boy, I had to think a lot of these are hard questions. And I think it's also very telling that the first question is, what are you good at? And I'm like, I don't know. I've never done a thing in my life. The culturally ingrained levels of humility at play. But I think one of my superpowers is the ability to communicate across disciplines and to act as that translator between creative intention, creative goals, technological constraints, and also capabilities, and to build that vision alignment on the creative front across people and teams. That's something that I've done in a variety of different places, and it's work that I've discovered I really enjoy because, again, the thing that has really driven me and has since undergrad discovering theater from writing been a huge motivator is that collaboration. And so I've really had the opportunity to hone my skill set in learning how to talk with folks and get people excited about and seeing the same picture as we all try to strive towards building an experience or a game or whatever it is.
Outside of that superpower, what are your biggest strengths?
Again, the long pregnant pause. I am proud of my ability to communicate clearly, and when there's complex problems, to help folks really refocus on how do we drive towards action and decision rather than become stuck in the mire of discussing minutia or the logistics of things that are yet unimportant or ambiguous because we haven't put down big decisions yet. And that has come up again and again as something incredibly important and easy to lose as things get more and more complex. I think I also, or rather, I also am deeply excited by ambiguity and the ability to navigate that, or the opportunities to navigate that, rather than feeling paralyzed or kind of locked in or having the number of decisions overwhelm. The opportunity to really sort through that and think through it both logically and also have a gut reaction and then dissect why that gut reaction was there and then break down emotional instincts into intellectual decisions is something that I'm proud of myself for being able to do well and to then be able to communicate to others to build that alignment with.
What are your big weaknesses?
I talk a lot. And I tend to be a verbal processor. So sometimes when I am faced with something, especially when I'm surprised with something that is unknown or uncertain, where I haven't made a strong decision or have an opinion on, oftentimes my first instinct is to just kind of talk through it, and I'll start talking, and then suddenly I'm like, oh man, I've taken up a lot of meeting and airtime. And so it's something that I work on to, with the help of my team, them calling me out on that behavior, and then also me trying to process and be more succinct, and also recognize when the best thing to say is, hey, I need to think on this. Let's come back to this decision or this conversation after I've had some time to, digest, so you don't have to be present for my hour monologue where I figure out what's going on.
The classic question we've talked a lot about, what are your stress reactions?
Yeah. I'm I'm thinking about what I might have said in the past, and I'm also thinking about my behaviors in the moment. And I'm like, oh, I don't remember what I said, but I know where I am now. We can cut this first part of rambling if you want to. Let me try to answer succinctly instead of verbally process it. One of my stress reactors can be that I've recognized in the past is I go heads down on solving problems and communicate less. Right. And you'll see me disappear because I'm like, I can solve this narrative or story structure problem. And I am grumpy at people. So I don't want to talk to them while I'm super grumpy. And if left unchecked, it means that I have a impulse to disappear rather than be more present. And so that's something I actively work against. I also, again, one of my strengths is also my weaknesses in terms of, when it comes to stress reactors, is I am proud of the instincts and emotional decision making that I've built to make strong decisions with a lot of built experience, but also in a stressful situation, I don't always then follow up with that step I mentioned of breaking down that instinctual decision into intellectual logic that others can follow. And so making sure I do that homework is something that gets more wobbly the more stressed I get. I try to shortcut to the decision and sometimes don't bring people along the journey. I solve the math problem. I tell you the answer is 42, but I don't show the equation to build your confidence of why we got there.
And what are your upkeep needs? Which I think you will be the first guest who actually knows what I mean by default when I say upkeep needs, because we've talked about it a lot.
Yeah. I think for me, connection and grounding of relationships is incredibly important to me. And so time for us to connect as people, even as we're very busy, is important. The space to kind of check in and give very honest and open feedback if, a feeling was hurt or a toe was stepped on, knowing that I can share that and that others can share that with me, even when we're really stressed and feel really busy, that doesn't become something that we dismiss or say we don't have time for, is really important and helpful for me in terms of that upkeep.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me in this good, but also I personally feel a little bit of awkwardness just because we talk about this stuff so much on the regular, and then doing it ostensibly for an audience. I need to make sure that we don't fall into shorthand. So thank you for joining me on this journey. I really appreciate the time. Here at the end of the pod, I often like to let you give shout outs or say anything to our audience that you want to instill in their brains.
Yeah. I want to definitely say that I'm really proud of the team that we've built together, Carl. I think we have a group of incredible folks who have made something really spectacular. And we're truly making things that are exciting, and players are telling us they've never played anything like it. And as a game developer, it is very rare to get opportunities like that, where, folks are truly experiencing something novel and loudly telling you so. So I'm really excited for folks to get to play Retail Mage here in just the next couple days, or probably in past tense, depending on when this podcast comes out. And for you to see for yourself the work that we put on. Retail Mage available on Steam. Subscribe and follow and like and all that good stuff. And
ring that bell.
Check it out. Yeah, ring that bell.
Amazing. And if someone listening heard an answer or heard something that you shared and was really interested in following up and learning more or engaging with you, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, folks can find me on most social platforms under the tag of Michael Yichao. And you can, of course, hit up Jamminty via the jamminty.studio website. And I am managing those accounts, so you will find me very quickly there as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining.
That's great to talk, Carl. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the entire episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it with your friends or anyone you think could benefit from it, and leave us a positive rating or subscribe. This episode was edited by Christopher Delano, music by Jake Hall, who's available for composer work in games. And if you're interested in learning more about the Game Founders support community, go to gamefounders.org or email me at carl@gamefounders.org. Thanks so much.